Here with John Ramdeen and Robin Black, we're looking ahead to Saturday night at the prelim portion of the Fight Night card from Salt Lake City, Utah, which will be airing here on Fight Network. It's going to be headlined by Court McGee taking on Dominique Steele at 170 pounds. And Court McGee, I know you guys had a chance to chat with him. Separately, I had a chance to chat with him, so we could compare notes here.
Nice.
But certainly he is from Utah himself, so a lot of local attention on Court McGee. And this is going to be his third fight in 8 months after that long 2-year layoff. But this is somebody that certainly, I think, is someone that genuinely gets a lot of interest going into his fights just because of the nature of his style. And this is a very intelligent guy when you do get a chance to speak with him.
Very true, and he is thrilled that he gets to perform in Salt Lake City. He said he never expected that his family and friends would ever get to see him fight in his own backyard, so to speak. So I expect to see a really outstanding performance from him. You mentioned how well-spoken he is. He's a very intelligent, analytical fighter. He understands his body. He understands what he's good at. And part of that is the grind. And he said very few people basically can match what he does. He says it's all intentional, and I think we're going to see a great performance from him.
Yeah, Dominique Steele is a great fighter, and with all due respect, I know we're going to talk about him lots in the future. We're talking about Court McGee now because we chatted with him, got some extra insight, and he's the hometown guy. And you're right, he's very smart, and it's very calculating how he builds his endurance game. And I'll tell you straight up, if you talk to 100 strength and conditioning coaches, experts, high-level experts, they'll say he's doing it wrong. You're not supposed to exhaust yourself and then train. But he's not doing it wrong for the world that he lives in, the world that he competes in, and the environment that he creates for him and his opponent. He will make you both tired, and then he'll be better at fighting tired than you are. And really, on its own level, that is highly, highly intelligent. It's creating the environment you'll be in. You don't do that because for skill development purposes, you don't want to be training exhausted. You don't do that because it can create injuries. There's a lot of reasons coaches will tell you not to do that. But when you look at it from Court McGee's perspective, he's 100% right. We're both going to be exhausted, and Court McGee's going to be a better fighter while exhausted.
When you bring up the fact that strength and conditioning coaches would disagree with that, is it because they don't have an understanding of what's actually happening, the reality of mixed martial arts when you're in there? So yeah, all these things may be true, but when you're in there and your body is beaten up, you need to go to a place that you might not have been before.
I think it's tough to undermine experts.
Sure.
We live in a world where everybody thinks they're smarter than experts, and we're not smarter than strength and conditioning people. But what is different about what Court McGee's doing is he's creating a structure based entirely on how he's going to fight. I think in the long run, they would say, if you want to be champion of the world, if you want to be the greatest in the world at this thing, and we're going to build your conditioning and your strength and stuff around being great and winning every single fight forever, we can't do it this way. Right. But Court McGee's building it around winning tonight, beating that guy tonight. And that is super logical. And it's super interesting.
Also, just throwing out, we were busy with interviews this week. When I was chatting with Yair Rodriguez, and this ties into the point you guys were making, he brought up the fact that those fighting in Salt Lake City, you are fighting at elevation. And Brian Stan added as well that he was amazed talking to all the different fighters who did not come in earlier to acclimate themselves. So a Court McGee who does train in Utah, that could be an interesting story to watch
extra advantage
on Saturday, especially for a number of these fighters that are competing on this card, not excluding our main event competitors, Yair Rodriguez, who has fought in Mexico City before, unlike Alex Caceres. So that's something to watch on Saturday is the elevation. And I will fully admit, I didn't even realize that going in, that Salt Lake City factored into that.
Yeah, no, it's true. And again, I'm sure that's part of the strategy with Court, that people aren't paying attention to exactly where they're fighting. The goal is, okay, this is my opponent. What does my opponent do? How can I exploit certain things, instead of looking at the landscape of where you're fighting and how your environment will affect you?
You know, of all the cliches in the world we say about fighting for 25, 30, 50 years, this one's a war of attrition. They're all wars of attrition. Every fight's a war of attrition. So that's what Court McGee, and that's what Yair Rodriguez is talking about, is if we accept that as a truth, that we're in a war of attrition, and we better be training attrition.
Some other highlights of the prelim fights we're going to see in heavyweight action: Victor Pesta taking on Marcin Tybura, and Teruto Ishihara, who I think has carved out a bit of an interesting scope of himself just through his personality. He's a very entertaining individual fighting at featherweight against Horacio Gutierrez as well. So the prelims, I think with the heavyweights, these are two guys that I don't think really on the heavyweight map at this point, but nonetheless, I think will be interesting, especially if elevation becomes a problem.
When I look at this entire card, I think if you're a big MMA fan, you followed for a long time, you're looking at Cub Swanson, you're looking at Tatsuya Kawajiri.
Which you could argue is the biggest fight on this card.
It is the biggest fight on the card. Let's not kid ourselves. It's the biggest fight on the card. I think, however...
John Ramby with the stamp there.
If you look at the rest of the athletes on this card, it's kind of prospects. This is the opportunity for these guys to separate themselves from the pack. Rodriguez, for example, you go out and you get a huge victory over Alex Caceres. Again, it's like, okay, well, who is this guy? Oh, yeah, he beat this Rosa kid. He was a prospect. But then you start getting big victories over named guys, and then you move yourself into big money fights. So there's a whole bunch of opportunities for the athletes because really not a lot of people are talking about this fight card. However, Monday morning, people could be talking about the fight card if you're seeing jumping knockouts like this. So these fighters do have an opportunity because there's no real big names on the fight card. They get to be the big names.
Yeah, Rodriguez and Caceres is fun because they believe and they express themselves as if fighting doesn't have a structure. And that's a really cool way to fight. You know, we learn you must put your hand here and your head here and you stand this way. And after a two, you pull this. They just improvise.
The art.
And, yeah, the art. And speaking of art, and speaking of the names that we're dropping of all the people that we spoke to this week, I got one on the ground. I'm going to pick up that one, Cub Swanson. We also spoke to Cub Swanson this week. And, man, he's a real artist. He's a real artist. He's out there to use his body to paint you a picture or write you a song. And that is an incredibly beautiful thing. And he's on Fight Pass. There's a whole world of Fight Pass that's trying to expand. I work for them now. I commentate Shootout Brazil. And when we were commentating that, and they were rolling things, this is what they wanted us to talk about. Because this is the biggest fight on the card. But it's on Fight Pass for a reason. Because if you're a fight fan, this is the fight you want to watch. So you're going to have to get Fight Pass.
All right, so you can catch the prelims coming up this Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We will be airing them here in Canada on Fight Network. You can check out those 4 fights, including Court McGee and Dominique Steele.